Hey everybody, thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today we are back and we are answering questions from Reddit again. This is, I think, the third time that I've made this video where I basically just go through a few of the different fitness related subreddits and answer a few questions that I think that I could help contribute to and clarify. Specifically, we do have 5 posts to get through today. And before we hop into the first one, if this is your first time here, my name is Justina. I'm a New York City-based personal trainer who believes that there are no dumb questions, because if you don't know the answer to something, you should be able to ask and you should get a clear and respectful response. So if that sounds good to you, I would love for you to subscribe if you have not already. I have a really lofty goal of trying to hit 100K by the end of the year, so every little bit helps. But with that, let's jump into the first question. What does lift heavy actually mean? How do I know what a good heavy weight for me as a lifting beginner is? And how many reps and sets should I be aiming for? Does this only refer to free weights, or are machines all right as well? All right, so there's a few questions in here. I want to spend most of the time just talking about what heavy or like lifting heavy actually means. There's a lot more minutia that we can get into in terms of like sets and reps with specific training goals, but I think this is going to be the most helpful thing across the board for everybody. So lifting heavy means that you're lifting heavy enough weight to stimulate specific adaptations. Typically what we're looking for is increased bone density and increased muscle mass. And I would say a good rule of thumb, if we're looking for an actual percentage, is around 60% of your 1 rep max. That's kind of like the minimum of where we want to be. Now, I do have a whole other video where I break down how to determine different intensity levels for yourself and then how to gauge the weight that you should be lifting. So if you want a little bit more of those details, I would recommend watching that video. But I think for this specific answer, we can make it even more simple. Let's say you're doing 10 reps of an exercise. If you are not slowing down by the last 2 reps, the weight is probably not heavy enough. If you do not feel like the last few reps are more challenging than the first few, it is probably not heavy enough. If your heart rate is not elevated by the end of your reps, the weight is probably not heavy enough. If you feel like you could do 20 plus more reps of the exercise before your form breaks down, your weight is not heavy enough. All of those things are kind of the basics of what lifting heavy actually means. We also get some questions about like how many reps and sets they should be aiming for. I would say this person, since they're a beginner, is probably focused more on just like some basic hypertrophy work. So I would say 3 to 4 sets of 6 to 12 reps is going to be a great place to be. Honestly, even simpler, like 3 sets of 10. Great. Start there. Again, there's a lot more details in terms of getting more specific with what adaptation you're looking for. I have videos on all of those things, but I think 3 by 10 is a great place to start. And then does this only refer to free weights or machines all right as well? Across the board. Don't overcomplicate it. Weight is weight. So whether it's on a machine, whether it's kettlebells, dumbbells, bricks, sandbags, weight is weight. And we're looking for the same things, especially as a beginner, making sure that your last few reps are a little bit slower because that tells us that the intensity is right. Making sure that you don't have like 20 plus reps left in the tank. That tells us the intensity is right. Start with those things and then you can get more advanced. Next question. Running on a treadmill advice. This may sound incredibly stupid, but is there advice anyone can give me for running on a treadmill? I've attempted a few times, but I feel like my brain stops me every time I try to start running. I'm comfortable going 3.5 miles per hour, but anything more and it's like I can't get myself to jog. I'm just uncomfortably speed walking. I'm scared to just force myself too hard that I launch myself off because I'm currently working out at I think PF is Planet Fitness, so there's always a crowd. Like I said, I sound stupid. Number 1, not a dumb question at all. I think it sounds like the main thing that's going on here is that they don't feel comfortable running on the treadmill. So like they are power walking at 3.5, but then when they start to like try to jog, they just can't get themselves to do it. Totally fair. The treadmill, I think, is a great tool. I know that certain runners or like certain people think it's like inferior to running outside. I think everything is a tool and it's just about how you use it and what works best for you. The thing that is hard about the treadmill is, well, there's a number of things, but one of the things that is hard about the treadmill is that it is a steady state, right? When you're running outside, your pace is going to fluctuate a lot, literally with every single stride almost. But with a treadmill, you're kind of trapped in one pace zone. So I do find that it's harder to run anything aside from a recovery run pace on the treadmill because it's just hard to maintain that pace the entire time. So honestly, what I would do to like jump over that hurdle is try intervals. So start with like 15 to 20 seconds of running. I would go up to a 4. Like actually a lot of my recovery runs, I run between a 4 and a 4.5 on the treadmill, which is like snail's pace for me, but it keeps my heart rate super low. I don't need to worry about like really getting a lot of range of motion in terms of my stride. I can keep it very, very underneath myself. So I would start with like intervals. So try 15 or 20 seconds on, take 60 seconds to walk. And then over time, you're going to build up that confidence, which honestly, it just sounds like it's a confidence issue, which again is not stupid at all. And over time, you're going to have a lot better ability to actually run on the treadmill without that fear. Next question, seeking advice for weight loss, 5'3", 145 pounds. Hi everyone, I'm happy I found this community to seek out advice from some fellow petite girlies. I have an issue currently wanting to get into fitness. I'm 5'3", 145 pounds with a pear-shaped body. I want to lose weight. I'm thinking about 15 pounds, but I'm scared I will not like the way I look at a lighter weight because I have been underweight in the past. What advice do you have for a beginner in terms of weight loss? I think it's also important to note that I do not have access to a gym currently. Thank you all. So there seems to be two big questions here. How to lose weight as a petite woman, and what if I don't like the way that my body looks once I lose the weight? So we'll start with the weight loss question because that's actually the easiest one to answer. Weight loss is the same for everybody. No matter what these petite fitness influencers try to tell you, a smaller body, just because it's smaller, is not inherently different when it comes to losing weight than a larger body. It comes down to being in a calorie deficit, aka you're taking in less energy than you're expending. That is the basics of it. I didn't say it's easy to implement if you're small or if you're large, whatever. I'm just saying it is a simple concept that applies to all humans on earth. So we'll start there. I think that where the petite fitness influencers come in is like sure, a smaller body typically uses less energy than a larger body on a day-to-day basis. Smaller meat sack takes less energy to maintain and function than bigger meat sack, okay? Really, really simple. I know I've talked about this, I think, on both of these Reddit videos, but like there's always this, I don't know, kind of like woe is me, like, oh, it sucks I'm so small that I don't burn any calories. And like, I just think that we're framing it in completely the wrong way. But anyway, you can go watch one of those previous Reddit videos if you want to know more of my thoughts there. So anyway, some actionable advice for someone looking to lose weight, whether they're in a bigger body or a smaller body. Obviously, counting calories is a very simple way to kind of guesstimate how much you're ingesting on a day-to-day basis. I have a number of videos talking about that. Another big tip that I have for people is like really making sure that you're getting enough protein and fiber during the day, because these are the things that are going to take longer to digest, meaning they are going to help keep you satiated a lot longer throughout the day. A lot of times you see people kind of like saving up their calories for the end of the day to like reward themselves with something. And I don't love recommending that because I find that it helps to not only reinforce this like negative, I don't know, relationship with food. But I also find that a lot of times if we're restricting too much during the day, then we'll overeat at night. We're going to feel over hungry. So spreading out your intake throughout the day is a much better system, in my opinion. I would also say making sure that your deficit is a little more moderate to start. What you don't want to do is like go so deep into a deficit that you're just ravenous. You want to give your body like a chance to figure out how it feels during it. And a lot of times having a more of a moderate deficit that you can sustain and stay consistent with is going to give you better results in the long run. And the other thing this person talks about is not having access to a gym at this moment. That is technically fine. Like you can absolutely lose weight just by focusing on your nutrition. I would say the other thing to think about is just looking at your daily movement outside of, well, she's not going to the gym, so outside the gym, but just like daily movement in general, like how many steps are you taking? Obviously, if we can increase the energy expenditure a bit, that's going to help with the deficit. But we'll come back to this in a second. And I guess this is kind of leading us into the second question of like, well, what if I don't like how my body looks? So going to the gym is going to, if we're lifting weights, it's going to help maintain and preserve the muscle mass that you have. And that is going to be really, really important. Let's look at it from both questions here. So from a weight loss perspective, that's going to be important because obviously preserve your strength. It's going to be better for you hormonally to have some of that lean muscle mass on you. So then that way, like you're prioritizing fat loss rather than muscle loss as you're in your deficit. But on like the aesthetic side of worrying if you're going to like the way that your body looks, you're going to have a lot more say in like the shape and the sculpt of your body if you're actually lifting weights. Because while you unfortunately cannot spot reduce fat, you can spot build muscle. So if you're a pear shape and you start to lose a lot of weight and you start to lose your butt, guess what can fix that? strength training. So honestly, I would say like, even if you can't get to a gym for whatever reason, even if you invest in like a set of weights for your upper body, so like something medium, and then a set of weights for your lower body, so something a little heavier, and then you get some like nice creative programming, you can do a lot with that. Those are my recommendations. Those are my thoughts on it. Take it or leave it. Let's move on to the next question. How to strengthen and support your knees. Hi runners, what are your best tips for strengthening the muscles around your knees so that your knees are less likely to hurt after a run? What about tips for caring for your knees before and after running? My favorite loop is 5.5 miles long, but my knees start to hurt at about 4 miles. I don't want to injure myself and not be able to run anymore. Please help. So first and foremost, I would say this is the best question for a physical therapist that you work with individually to answer, but obviously not everybody has access to that. So I'm going to throw a bunch of shit at you and hopefully we can find something that sticks in here. So number one, I know that you said you're doing, or your favorite loop is 5.5 miles. I want to know a little bit more like, how are we running that? Is that on a trail? Is that on pavement? Are we doing more of like recovery pace? Are we doing a little bit more speed work? Because that's going to tell us a lot about what type of force your knees are dealing with. Are we doing more recovery runs? That's going to be a little bit more force absorption. Are we doing more speed runs? That's a little bit more force production. Trail or pavement? Those are two very different. That's your foot hitting the ground. Two different types of impact on your knees, right? Pavement is typically going to be a little bit harder. It just has less cushion. And I think we're actually already getting some really great information now about kind of where your tolerance is, by the fact that you know that at 4 miles, your knees start to hurt. So that gives us a little bit idea of what's going on already. I would say once we can fill in more of those blanks, we have a lot more to work on in terms of where we're weaker and where we're stronger and where we need to fill in the blanks to support the type of running that you're doing. So we get into the next topic, strength training. Are you doing it? We want to make sure that we're training our legs, specifically unilaterally, since running is a unilateral sport. We're moving one leg at a time. And I would say we really want to make sure that we're training like all aspects of the muscles that insert into the knee, the quads, the hamstrings, the adductors. And I would also say we want to make sure that we're not only training in the sagittal plane, front, back, up, and down, because that's what we're going to see so repetitively in running. So we want to make sure that we're not overusing that range of motion or that movement pattern. Are we moving side to side? Are we rotating? Are we introducing other movement qualities into the body so that we don't overuse this one, which will cause injury over time? Well, not will, but like more likely to cause injury over time. And then finally, are you doing any type of mobility work? Remember that mobility is just strength training at the joint level. It's not simply passive stretching. That can actually be a part of mobility work, but that's not all it is. So looking at like, does your tibia rotate? This guy right here. How does your patella or your kneecap move? Do you have solid end range control in flexion and extension? There's a lot of different things to look at, especially when we're talking about knee stuff. But we also have to remember that a lot of times issues at the knee are actually just showing up at the knee, but it's a hip or an ankle issue. So how's your ankle dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, eversion and inversion? How's your hip rotation? You see a lot of knee issues come up with runners that are actually related to the ankle or the hip. And a lot of times it's because we're overusing moving in that sagittal plane through flexion and extension. So again, this is why I said like it's probably a better question for like one-on-one. There's a lot of stuff you can play with in there, a lot of stuff you can deep dive into. What I would start with is making sure you're strength training, taking all of the things that I said into account, because that's not going to hurt regardless, right? The second thing that I would start to look at is your mobility. I've made a ton of videos that can actually show you how to assess your own. You can always reach out to me. Maybe we can schedule something if you're interested, but figuring out if there is maybe a mobility limitation, implementing some corrective work there. And then third thing, if you can go see a physical therapist, I think it's worth it. But again, I know that not everybody has access to that. One more question. How do you train your core and how do you integrate it into your workouts? Hi, I started training around 6 months back for the first time. I swim and learn karate, and I am thinking of joining rock climbing, which I read somewhere in this sub is great for the core. I split my workout into lower and upper. I don't have access to a pull-up bar near me, but I will consider buying one later. I was doing this routine by Joanna So, but while it got my heart pumping, I realized that it is perhaps not so deeply focused on strength and stability training. I really want to strengthen my entire core. I'll think about visible abs later, etc. Any tips? What do you do? And why can I not read? And how do you make it a part of your routine? Do you have a separate core day or do you do it every training day? Okay, let's first start by understanding what the core is. So, really simply, if we cut off like our head, arms, and legs, everything remaining could be considered the core. Just like to think of it as like the muscles that wrap around the whole trunk, because the entire function of our core is to protect and stabilize the spine. Now, if we think about what the spine does, the spine has a lot of different movement patterns that it can do. So the spine can go into flexion, extension, lateral flexion and extension, and then rotation. And then we also have to remember that while our core is going to do those things, it's also going to resist doing those things. So we can resist flexing, resist extending, resist bending side to side, resist rotating, okay? We call those anti-movements or anti-rotation, anti-flexion, yada, yada. So that's how you train your core. Now let's think about how do we fit all of that in. So if you're already strength training, I would just look at what you're already doing in your workouts and figure out what your core is doing in those movements. For instance, in a deadlift, your body is resisting rounding forward. So it's an anti-flexion exercise. If you're doing like single arm rows at the machine, that is technically going to be an anti-rotation exercise because you're resisting rotating at the trunk, right? So I would just go through first and like, what are you already hitting? Then whatever you're missing, can you add it into your warm up? Can you put it in as like a finisher at the end of a day? And then if you have more specific goals in terms of like a part of your core that you need a lot more strength in, like let's say you are on a softball team, so you're going to need a lot more strength through rotation. So then maybe you specifically add in a little bit more rotation work. That's how I would approach it. I stopped when what was it, like rock climbing was really good for your core? Maybe. I would think it's like more upper body, but yeah, this is why I'm always like, take what you see in Reddit with a grain of salt. So anyway, that's the whole video. I thought these were some unique questions this month, like unique questions that still could be relevant to the masses. So if you have a tricky fitness question that you would like answered, feel free to leave it down in the comments below. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out, and I will see you in the next one.